A 32-year-old Californian astrophysicist will make history tomorrow as the first American woman to go up in space. Dr. Sally Ride and 4 other astronauts are already on board preparing for a 40-hour countdown. Now, if all goes well, Sally will be blasting off on the 7th space shuttle mission at lunchtime, our time, tomorrow. Anita Findley's been looking at the woman who's being launched into space 20 years to the week after a Russian did the same.
They all flew from tests at Houston to a launch area at Cape Canaveral. Sally and her 4 male colleagues, who over the next week will be living, working and sleeping in an area about the size of an average garage. Sally Ride will go down in history as America's first woman in space. But to her colleagues, she's just one of the lads. She turned down a female unique addition in the shuttle. That's a makeup pack, and says she'll be treated the same as the others, although there are tests to see how a woman's body copes in space. Sally trains hard every day. As a teenager in California, she turned down a promising career as a tennis player and turned instead to astrophysics.
It's something that I've kind of had in the back of my mind for probably ever since junior high school. I think that, you know, when I was 12, if someone had offered me the chance to be an astronaut, I would have jumped at it then. I'd never known a test pilot or a fighter pilot or an attack pilot, and I wasn't quite sure what to expect from them, and I don't think they were quite sure what to expect from a, PhD physicist. And I think that we were all pleasantly surprised.
Sally won't be piloting the Challenger, but as a mission specialist, she'll be at the controls of its computer and its mechanical arm. Although it's her first trip in space, she's no stranger to shuttle launches. Her voice at mission control is a familiar sound to the crews on board.
We'll take a look at that, and the lighting still looks good to us. If you could maneuver the arm to get us a view of the other side of the nose, that'd be helpful to us. Okay, Gordo, that's a pretty good shot.
She got married last year to Steve Hawley. He's an astronaut too, although he isn't due to go up in space until next year. But Sally's friends say the fact that she's made it first won't go to her head. They say she's a very down-to-earth girl.
Well, let's come right down to earth. Well, nearly, anyway. You can't keep the subject of airfares out of the news for long these days. The £99 flight offered by People's Express has been going for a month now, and already there are signs that the major airlines are hitting back.
The Space Shuttle Challenger is all set for launch tomorrow with America's first spacewoman on board. Sally Ride will be one of 5 astronauts due to blast off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at lunchtime tomorrow.
What has captured the imagination here is that America is putting its first woman into space. And never mind that the Russians did that 20 years ago. America has a new cover girl and a new song.
Ride, Sally, ride, ride that big bird to the sky.
I think that it's maybe too bad that our society isn't further along and that this is such a big deal.
The big deal must have seemed as far away as the moon when 6 years ago a newspaper advertisement caught Sally Ride's eye. Wanted astronauts, male and female. She was one of 8,000 to answer the ad and one of 35 to be accepted. She finally decided against becoming a professional tennis player. In April last year, when NASA announced that she would go up on the 7th shuttle flight, her training began in earnest. She changed her hairstyle, and NASA waited for the publicity to break, which it did, but there was never any fear of the press interfering with Sally Ride's training. Her training, in fact, has been identical to that of male astronauts, though not many people, astronauts or otherwise, have practiced tennis weightless. And scientists believe that flying in space will not affect women any differently from men. Though NASA have had to make a few minor alterations on board, as Sally Ride explained to a woman interviewer.
This will fly on all shuttle flights, but it's probably significant that it flies first on mine.
Oh dear, how Victorian.
It really is, isn't it?
Her job on the flight will be to operate the mechanical arm, or as NASA call it, the remote manipulator system. She will put a satellite into orbit, then several hours later, pluck it back. Sally Ride knows that she has broken into a dangerous man's world, but her enjoyment of her job is more basic than that.
Death-defying isn't the reason that I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Ride, Sally, ride, it's your turn to fly. Among the stars, we'll rendezvous on Mars.
John Suchet, News at 10 in Washington.
Challenger, which will carry the first woman American astronaut, lifts off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida at lunchtime today. 32-year-old physicist Sally Ride joins 4 men on the flight, 20 years after the Russian Valentina Tereshkova became the first woman in space. There are doubts that
Into space, astronaut Sally Ride went up with 4 other crew members in Space Shuttle Challenger.
It has been a perfect routine countdown to this 7th shuttle flight, a flight which will set several firsts, not just America's first woman astronaut to go into space, but also the largest number of astronauts to go up in one vehicle, 5 in all. Sally Ride's job will be to use the mechanical arm to put a satellite into space, then after several hours to pluck it back again.
We go for main engine start. We have main engine start and ignition. And liftoff. Liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Roger your roll, Challenger. 40 seconds. During its 6-day flight, the shuttle will launch 2 communication satellites before landing on a narrow runway just a few miles from where it took off. John Suchet, ITN, in Washington.
This is STV. The time now is 9:30.
Mrs. Thatcher gets her common market rebate, but it's less than she wanted. America blasts her First Lady astronaut into space. In Poland, Wałęsa's kept waiting, the crowds become impatient. And England's cricketers cruise to a place in the World Cup semi-finals. Good evening. America's first spacewoman is in orbit. Sally Ride blasted into space with 4 other astronauts in the Space Shuttle Challenger and said it was better than any ride at a fun fair. Mission Control say things are going well and the crew's performance is spectacular.
It had been a perfect countdown to what was to be a perfect launch. The crew had their traditional breakfast this morning, 5 of them this time, more than ever before, and of course, Sally Ride, America's first woman astronaut, whose job it will be to operate the shuttle's mechanical arm, to put a satellite into space, and then several hours later, to pluck it back again.
We go for main engine start. We have main engine start and ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut. And the shuttle has cleared the tower.
Roger your roll, Challenger. 40 seconds. A successful launch has become almost routine, but each time the space agency seems to provide more and more impressive pictures. This time, as Challenger reached the outer edge of the Earth's atmosphere, we were given the closest look yet at the jettisoning of the 2 solid rocket boosters. And soon after that, the onboard cameras were already showing us the payload area from where the shuttle will put 2 satellites into space. John Suchet, ITN, in the United States.
Party leader Lech Wałęsa is still waiting at his home in Gdansk for word on when and where he can meet the Pope. It's expected to be in Częstochowa. Astronauts have now launched 2 communication satellites into orbit. America's first woman in space, Sally Ride, played back a video recording of the first launch. That was of a Canadian satellite.
What we're doing right now, Rick, is rewinding the VTR and setting it up for the beginning of the sequence. And you ought to be seeing pretty soon is the start of mechanical sequence, and you can see the fin shield opening up on the Anik. You saw a little bit of the jump there that we saw yesterday.
We saw that. And here she goes.
The drum-shaped orbiter popped out of Challenger's hold, spinning like a top for stability. The crew have now launched a second one for Indonesia. After all the activity, arrest and medical checkups, all smiles for the world's first floating stethoscope.
Challenger has now put 2 communication satellites in orbit, one for Canada, the other for Indonesia. America's first woman astronaut, Sally Ride, was in charge of the first launching. It went perfectly.
Which is behind the open Anik sun shield, start to open. And there it goes now, you can see it.
Looks good and smooth. No problems at all.
And show you the last part of mechanical sequence. Let you see the spin up.
Stop with the deploy. That's real pretty. That's my first view of it. Beautiful. We deliver. Okay.
You got it.
Ground control at Houston say they're pleased with how the mission has gone so far and with the way the crew dealt with minor equipment problems. With the satellites launched, Sally Ride and her 4 colleagues are now starting a 4-day program of experiments in different types of science.
And you ought to be seeing pretty soon is the start of mechanical sequence, and you can see the fin shield opening up on the annex. Saw a little bit of the jump there that we saw yesterday.
We saw that. And here she goes.
The Canadian communications satellite was the first of 2 to be launched on this mission, fulfilling NASA's description of the shuttle as a delivery truck in space. The second satellite was for Indonesia to improve telephone links between the thousands of islands that make up Indonesia.
That's real pretty. That's my first view of it.
So far, both the delivery truck and its drivers are doing well. John Suchet, ITN, in the United States.
Ghana's leader, Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlins...
Space Shuttle Challenger are today preparing to film the first television pictures of an orbiting shuttle from outside, including the firing of some of its rockets. After successfully launching 2 communication satellites over the weekend, the crew have been relaxing. Today, the cameras were turned onto the astronauts, who were obliged by modelling blue T-shirts with the initials TFNG on them. Mission Control says it stands for 35 New Guys, a reference to the astronaut class of 1978, which was chosen specifically to fly the shuttle. That's it from the news desk for the moment. I'll hand you back now to Anne.
In their cabin to 2/3 the level on Earth in a test for future spacewalks. They performed well, one of the computers did not, but it was such a minor hitch it didn't even interrupt the flight plan. The only woman on board, Sally Ride, adjusted the cameras for a good close-up view of the Earth and then did some exercises, joking that she was one of the few people to run across the Indian Ocean. Another astronaut showed how complicated their experiments could get.
The motor spot temp gets 110 degrees. He wants to go with a space pointing attitude. That will be a target of 2, body vector of +5, and it'll be a pitch of 0, a yaw of 090, an omicron of 0, and we'll sit there for 15 minutes and then go to -BLD.
Term next year, according to his Vice President, Mr. George.
And there's a lighter programme of experiments for the crew, including Mission Commander Robert Crippen and Sally Ride, the first woman in space. Yesterday there was a brief computer hitch when Challenger launched a West German experiment platform. But tests went ahead as planned to see how the craft was affected by things like space dust and radiation from the Earth 185 miles away. A Dutch infrared sensor on the platform is designed to fix a satellite's position in space just by measuring heat variations on the Earth's surface.
Space Shuttle Challenger have been spending their 4th day in orbit conducting a series of experiments which may eventually help in the treatment of hormone deficiency. But the 5 astronauts had time to enjoy themselves too.
For 7 hours, Sally Ride worked on Challenger's hormone refining experiment. Electrophoresis, separating cells from a liquid, produces medicines of a purity which can't be matched on Earth. Already there are plans for a space drug factory. There's been one minor snag today. A computer in the cargo hold was overheating, so Challenger turned round to keep it in shadow. Tomorrow the crew will put a cargo platform into space, something which should provide some spectacular views of Challenger herself. Meanwhile today, as the astronauts clocked up 1 million miles in orbit, they produced a bag of jelly beans, a present from the White House. Even in space, they go down well.
It's a little easier to make the catches here.
Past the halfway point of their 6-day mission. They were asked to point the cargo doors away from the sun to give some sensitive equipment a good cold soak before tomorrow's experiments. And they tested a radar aerial that will track those experiments when they're released into space on board a West German satellite tomorrow. As a step towards establishing commercial factories in space, Sally Ride tested a process for making complex drugs, which is much easier away from the Earth's gravity. And then the camera caught them eating a surprise snack smuggled on board by Commander Crippen. A bag of President Reagan's jelly beans, straight from the White House to tickle the astronauts' taste buds. The results of this experiment were not recorded by Mission Control.
Mission next year. Pilot Rick Houck will maneuver the shuttle around an experiment floating platform which is floating freely in space, while Sally Ride and John Fabian try to catch it with a robot arm. Meanwhile, poor weather in Florida poses problems for Friday's touchdown, the first ever attempted on the American East Coast.
NASA say the shuttle may not be able to land in Florida on Friday because of bad weather, though you can't see it on this satellite picture. The shuttle may go instead to either New Mexico or California, or alternatively it may spend another 2 days in orbit. Shuttle Challenger.
Today's Challenger project is in many ways the most vital of all shuttle experiments to date. For the successful recovery of a satellite using a robot arm is the first step towards proving that shuttle can be used to repair satellites in space and even build space stations. The satellite the shuttle launched today carried 6 experiments, as well as the cameras that produced the first pictures of the shuttle in space. It flew free for 4.5 hours, a shorter flight than planned. But the robot arm passed this crucial test. Next year it will fly for real, grabbing a broken scientific satellite which blew a fuse, bringing it into the shuttle for repairs and releasing it again. Weather in Florida may be too bad for the Challenger to land there on Friday as planned. Diverting it to California to land is a small setback to long-term plans for the shuttle to take off and land from Cape Canaveral as regularly as a jumbo jet. Further proof that the Russians are developing a space shuttle of their own comes from pictures sent to ITN by the Australian Defence Department. They were taken by an Australian Air Force patrol shadowing a Russian recovery ship in the Indian Ocean 3 months ago. We reported exclusively at the time that the Russians had tested a mysterious winged spacecraft by sending it into a single orbit of the Earth and recovering it in the Indian Ocean. It was the second such test in a year. The large cones on the 15-foot-long model spaceplane are recovery beacons. On the deck of the Russian ship Chumikan, the heat tiles, like the American shuttles, are clearly visible, and the plane's up-tilted wings resemble America's very first design for a manned spacecraft over 20 years ago.
Astronauts aboard the Space Shuttle Challenger have carried out the most spectacular maneuver of their mission. They released a satellite into orbit and then recaptured it. It's an operation which could prove very important for the future of space technology.
Sally Ride and John Fabian justified their places on Challenger today with a remarkable space first. Operating a 50-foot robot arm, they dropped a pallet loaded with experiments into orbit, and then after several hours brought it back on board. The spars platform was built by West German engineers. It was floated out to a point where it was 1,000 feet above Challenger. Then a remote camera started beaming down the spars eye view of the shuttle.
That's beautiful.
180 miles above the clouds, Challenger's true speed of 17,500 miles an hour seemed no more than a gentle glide. The southern hemisphere was shrouded in dense cloud on this orbit, a reminder that Challenger sees summer and winter every 90 minutes. Then came the other first, retrieval of the spars platform. This could have been a damaged satellite or a crippled spacecraft. It's underlined the true importance of the shuttle orbiter's role as a space truck, equally suitable for delivery or recovery.
The Pope meets Poland's general again. Here, after a fight, mortgage is up 1.25%. The Queen's speech insists on union reform. Just what the space shuttle can do.
The crew of the American space shuttle Challenger today launched a satellite into space from the cargo bay and then recovered it. It's the first time this has ever been done. It means future shuttles will be able to repair satellites in orbit or bring them back to Earth for servicing. This is how they did it.
When Mission Control suggested to astronaut Sally Ride that these pictures looked like an animation, Sally Ride from inside Challenger said, oh no they don't. In fact, not only are they real, but they are the most remarkable shots ever taken of the shuttle in orbit. The first time the spaceship has been filmed by a camera not attached to it, and therefore the first time it has been seen in its entirety in space, and seen here orbiting the Earth at 18,000 miles an hour.
That's a beautiful shot.
The pictures came from this satellite built by West Germany and carrying several scientific experiments as well as that camera. The satellite is the shuttle's plaything. Using the mechanical arm, the astronauts put the satellite out into space, let it go, then latched onto it again, then let it go again. Then Sally Ride, operating the arm, closed in on the satellite, this time for the last time.
We're looking out the overhead window to assist in all of the ranging as we get in closer. As you can see, it's a very smooth operation coming in. The RMS very easily controllable, and the spars itself is a very stable platform.
The satellite was brought back into the payload area, a perfect practice for the time when the shuttle will have to retrieve satellites in need of repair and put them back into space again.
We got all 5 of us up here today.
The crew might have an unexpected bonus in store, a longer flight than planned. The shuttle may be a marvelous spacecraft, But once it gets back into the Earth's atmosphere, with its engines cut, it is just a glider, with a glider's susceptibility to cloud, rain and crosswinds. And judging by the thickness of the cloud the astronauts could see today as they passed over Florida, the landing planned for Friday might well be delayed. John Suchet, News at 10 in the United States.
Space Shuttle Challenger may spend another day or two in orbit because of bad weather over Cape Canaveral, where it's due to land tomorrow. A final decision will probably be taken this morning. Because of the uncertainty, President Reagan has cancelled plans to travel to watch the landing.
Shuttle, and the news today is about Challenger's landing tomorrow. It's due to make the first landing at the launch site, Kennedy Space Center, but the weather might not be good enough. Reg Turnell in America has the up-to-the-minute news. What decisions have been made, Reg?
Well, John, we hope the thunderstorms here will clear for the first shuttle landing back at the Cape around midday tomorrow, and it'll be accompanied by a huge sonic boom right across Florida. And if there's a west wind, we'll have to wear gas masks alongside the runway in case fumes from the shuttle blow towards us. Well, earlier, a very happy Challenger crew did some more tests with the German satellite on the robot arm. But after another fabulously successful mission, there is just one worry. Once again, the three all-important fuel cells, they're vital for the landing, aren't working very well.
Reg, thank you very much indeed. Let's hope it is a happy landing.
To land at Cape Canaveral in a few hours' time, despite earlier indications that the landing might be postponed. If weather permits, it'll be the first time a shuttle has landed at its home base. There's been some technical difficulty for the astronauts on the last part of their mission, as Robert Bazell of NBC News now reports.
There was one problem. A power unit important to the landing failed a test. There are 2 spare units, but NASA officials decided that because of the failure, the shuttle should land. That creates a problem because the weather at the Kennedy Space Center, the prime landing site, has not been good. Forecasters say there is a good chance it will improve, but if it doesn't, the shuttle will land at Edwards Air Force Base in California, where conditions have been good. If the Challenger does come down in Florida, in parts of Texas, Louisiana, and Florida, it will be visible as a speck moving quickly across the sky. The trip will end on the 3-mile-long concrete runway cut through the Florida swamp.
America.
BBC One First, News Round Extra with John Craven.
2,900 feet.
Hello again, and tonight on News Round Extra, the safe return of the Space Shuttle Challenger. It touched down in America this afternoon after a mission that lasted exactly 6 days, 2 hours, 24 minutes and 10 seconds. But Challenger didn't go straight home. Thunderstorms and high winds at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida stopped that happening. Instead, it landed 3,000 miles away in California. So the celebrations planned at Kennedy for the 5 astronauts, including Sally Ride, the first American woman in space, will have to wait for a while. And the new runway at Kennedy, specially built for shuttle landings, will also have to wait for another mission before it welcomes home its first spaceship. Our space editor, Reg Turnell, who's been covering the flight of Challenger for Newsround, will be on the line from America very soon with the latest news. Challenger blasted off from Kennedy last Saturday, and the bosses of America's space team waited until late this morning before deciding that, weather-wise, it was too risky for the shuttle to go back there. So the astronauts headed instead for Edwards Air Force Base on the desert sands of California.
Challenger turning final now.
But NASA made good use of the change of plans. They've always wanted to know how the shuttle would behave when it landed in a crosswind. That's when the wind blows sideways onto the spacecraft. There was a crosswind at Edwards, and the shuttle still made a perfect landing.
Turning toward the center line. 14,000 feet. 292 knots.
We're away to come to California.
Roger that.
Gears coming.
Despite the change of landing site, the astronauts were happy with the way the mission had gone, and Mission Control was obviously delighted too.
Roger, we see that. Congratulations, a great-looking landing.
There were various routine checks, and 40 minutes after landing, the 5 astronauts emerged into the sunshine. The first task was to walk round the spacecraft to inspect it before they could head off for their big welcome home. Well, on the line now, I hope, is our space editor, Reg Turnell. Reg, I suppose everybody really is very pleased with the way things have gone.
Yes, John, there's a news conference going on here now, and the head of the shuttle program has just described it as a superb mission, with Germany's Spars satellite representing a whole new approach to the design of future spacecraft. And they're planning to take it up again early next year for a full rehearsal of repairing damaged spacecraft in orbit. And Sally Ride's flight was described as the first milestone for women astronauts. The second milestone will be when nobody notices when women fly because they're doing the same professional job as men.
But all of you there, Reg, at Kennedy must have been very disappointed that the shuttle didn't land with you.
Oh, terribly disappointed. 4,000 of us had a long, wasted night fighting off the mosquitoes. Those empty stands were filled by a great fleet of chartered buses. 2,000 newsmen and 2,000 VIPs were taken out to the edge of the runway, led by Maureen Reagan, the president's daughter, who wanted to be first to congratulate Sally Ride. Mind you, we were never very hopeful. There have been thunderstorms around the Cape all the week, with the 5-kilometer runway often hidden in fog.
Well, Reg, when do you think a shuttle will land at Kennedy?
Well, not until next year now. Perhaps the 11th shuttle flight in January. That's because the next flight by Challenger in August is a night landing which must be in the desert for safety reasons. Then in October, when the shuttle flies Europe's Space Lab, that's so heavy that that too must be landed in the desert in case it overshoots. But there's little doubt, John, that by the middle of next year, the astronauts will be putting on their maneuvering units and flying off without tethers to do their first space repair on a broken-down solar maximum satellite that's supposed to be studying the sun.
Well, Reg, we'll look forward to that, and thank you very much indeed for your reports. Well, obviously disappointment at the Cape, but good news at least that Challenger has had such a successful return to Earth. Well, Reg Turnell has been doing a lot of travelling for Newsround Extra. Just a few weeks ago, one of the other space shuttles, Enterprise, was flown on a tour of Europe, and Reg caught up with it at the Paris Air Show. He went there to find out about the future plans for the shuttle program.
The tour was to show that the space shuttles, 3 of them by the end of this year, are now operational. Satellites are already big business, and the shuttles will launch them for anybody at about £10 million each. Rockwell, who make the shuttles, also want to use them to build big space stations in orbit, as their shuttle manager, Dr. Rocco Petrone, told me.
We're looking forward to the present Space Lab staying up some 21 days, and then possibly the second step, some 45 days, leading to the development of modules which then can be assembled by the orbiter, and one could envision a space station of various sizes. I think the first sizes will be modest, but we talk of a crew of some 6 to 12 people that could perform experiments in that space station and given us the requirements we need, literally, to keep developing. Many ways the size is literally unlimited, and only the future will tell what that size will be.
One of Sally Ride's jobs was to practice making very pure medicines in weightless conditions. Tests on the first 7 flights have given hope that cures can be found for illnesses like leukemia and diabetes.
We plan on being able to develop new materials, new pharmaceuticals, drugs which can be used, we think, to cure some sicknesses on Earth that cannot be treated today. I really feel with a laboratory such as we can build in 0G, in which man has really never lived for any lengthy period of time, out of that laboratory will come many new things for benefits here on Earth, new products, hopefully new medicines, and I think the future is literally only bound by our mind and not bound by our tools once we step into space.
The space shuttle is operational now, and in future all the launches and landings should look much the same, unless of course anything goes wrong. So what's important is the work the shuttle's doing while in orbit.
One of the astronauts at the Paris Air Show was Don Peterson, who spent 4 hours spacewalking on the 6th shuttle flight. He told me that these EVAs, or extravehicular activities, will soon become a routine but vital part of life in space.
Basic idea of the EVA is to do a couple or 3 things. One is to grab a satellite that's already on orbit, bring it in close to the bay, put people outside and repair or service it as necessary. Another is to work on the orbit itself, and we basically, all our crews train for contingency situations, should the orbiter need to have its doors closed or some piece of equipment tied down or cut loose. And I guess finally, we are developing a backpack in which a human being can, in effect, become a small spacecraft and go from one vehicle to another for resupply or simply to transfer people.
Ariane, Europe's own rocket, can launch satellites more cheaply, so it's providing the shuttle with some fierce international competition. But Ariane, of course, can't be reused like the shuttle, and Dr. Petrone has no doubts about the exciting future ahead.
I think up to the year 2000, with the tools we now have, with those that will be developed to be placed in orbit of the 90s, I think from that, mankind will come to see more of the returns of space. And then as far as colonization, I literally think that'll be beyond the year 2000. So in that regard, I believe you'll see a development of requirements, starting with the space laboratory and the shuttle, leading to the kind of proof we need to say we can benefit mankind by staying there longer, and hopefully benefit mankind by staying in space permanently.
That's beautiful. Another space first.
So, some things there that the shuttle could be doing in the future. But today, just to recap, Challenger has landed safely, but 3,000 miles from home because of bad weather. The 5 astronauts prove that Challenger can do incredible things up in space, but down on Earth, there's still nothing that anyone can do about the weather. Well, next Friday, I'll be reporting to you from America, not about space, but about television, and a very special channel in America just for children.
Nick is our name. Nick is our name. You with the flick or trick or kick, then you know you're with Nick. Nickelodeon.
That's the TV station for America's children next week on Newsround Extra. Meantime, have a nice weekend, see you on Monday, and welcome back, Challenger.
In just over 2 minutes, young Scott Hunter continues the search for his missing father in episode 6 of the new...
Hello, good evening. America's space shuttle has landed in sunshine and safety. It was a picture-perfect landing for Challenger, diverted 3,000 miles from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida to Edwards Air Base on the West Coast to avoid bad weather. A happy homecoming for America's first spacewoman, Sally Ride, and her 4 crew colleagues. The captain's verdict, what a way to come to California. More on Challenger's success in a few minutes. Here's Ian Ross with today's other news.
Head slope and turning toward the center line.
Early this morning, the 5 astronauts on the shuttle Challenger thought and hoped that they could land at Cape Canaveral in Florida, where their families were waiting for them. But on orbit 96, just as Commander Bob Crippen was about to fire the shuttle's braking rockets to begin its descent to the Cape, NASA broke the news that weather there was so bad the astronauts would have to do 2 extra orbits and land at Edwards Air Force Base on the West Coast. The landing, like the rest of Challenger's second flight, went perfectly, or as NASA has it in its inimitable jargon, everything was nominal. In many ways, Challenger's most important job on this mission was to launch and to retrieve from space this satellite. The launching was a crucial test for the shuttle's robot arm. The arm passed the test with flying colors, launching and retrieving the satellite on Wednesday, not once, but twice. On future flights, the arm will capture broken satellites so they can be repaired in the shuttle's payload bay. The satellite it launched on this mission provided these, the first ever pictures of the shuttle in space. The payload bay is empty. The 2 communications satellites the shuttle carried into orbit were launched soon after liftoff from Cape Canaveral. It's a disappointment to NASA that the shuttle couldn't land back at Cape Canaveral. Challenger's next flight from the Cape, due in August, will be delayed because it will have to be ferried back from the West Coast. But that didn't affect the bounce in the step of the astronauts as they flexed their legs in good old Earth gravity for the first time in 6 days, 2 hours, 24 minutes and 10 seconds.
Mission accomplished. Shuttle makes a desert landing and a space revolution. The little girl hit by a police bullet Challenger is safely home, and it's chalked up a spectacular number of space firsts. The shuttle made a faultless touchdown, although it was 3,000 miles away from the planned landing site. It had been diverted because of bad weather at Cape Canaveral, but mission control still say this is the most successful flight of the whole shuttle program. On board Challenger was America's first woman astronaut, but as our science correspondent James Wilkinson reports, that wasn't the only breakthrough of this mission.
The weather at Cape Canaveral may have closed in, but there were no visibility problems here in California. After banking sharply, Challenger glided in for its final approach to the dry lake bed at the Edwards Air Force Base in the Mojave Desert. Bob Crippen at the controls has flown this route before. He's become the first man to make 2 flights in the shuttle. The dust is unwelcome. It rubs the shuttle's underbelly like sandpaper. The scratches will have to be repaired before the next flight. The landing had been thirsty work.
Congratulations, a great looking landing. The good news is the beer is very, very cold this morning. The bad news is it's 3,000 miles away. That's what I was afraid of.
It had been the most successful mission so far. The astronauts will feel well pleased when they look back on their flight. Sally Ride was in charge of Challenger's first job, the launch of the Canadian communications satellite. It underlined what the shuttle program is all about, making space pay. At the moment, at least, it's cheaper to launch satellites this way rather than with conventional rockets.
We deliver. Okay.
The big test came when the robot arm was used to deploy an experimental package. It's the first time the arm has released a satellite in this way. It drifted up to 1,000 feet from the shuttle. Later, the arm retrieved it and pulled it back into the cargo bay. In future, damaged satellites will be captured this way to be repaired. Cameras on board the mini-satellite sent back spectacular pictures of the shuttle, drifting along at a mere 17,000 miles an hour. The first time the shuttle has been photographed like this. After the landing today, the 5 astronauts, including America's first woman astronaut, emerged looking remarkably relaxed. It wasn't the usual style homecoming. The official welcoming party was on the other side of the continent. But at least President Reagan managed to speak to them.
Welcome home. Thank you very much, sir. And now this is the second time. You know, I was going to meet you in Florida, but then you decided to land in California. But again, you didn't stop and pick me up off the South Lawn like I asked you to. I'm guilty, sir.
There was a especially warm welcome from the crowd for Sally Ride.
It was fun, and in fact, I'm sure it's the most fun I'll ever have in my life.
Challenger will now have to be ferried back to Cape Canaveral on top of a Boeing 747, and that could delay the next scheduled launch in August by up to a week.
An 8-year-old girl sat up in hospital today and...
The shuttle's down and Sally's happy. Fine. Good evening. The Space Shuttle Challenger had a perfect landing in the California desert today. Not where the Americans really wanted it, but America is set to step up its journeys into space. 5 more flights are planned over the next 10 months, including one to bring back a satellite that's been in Earth orbit for more than 2 years. America's first woman astronaut, Sally Ride, said it was the highlight of her life. When President Reagan telephoned to say welcome back, he told her, "You were there because you were the best person for the job."
It has been, by general consent, the most successful shuttle mission to date, right down to these final stages, with first a steep dive, followed by a sharp bank on the approach to the runway, all without engines and all going perfectly. The weather, though, is not under NASA's control, and since Florida was thick with cloud, the shuttle once again landed on the dried lake bed in California. Not the concrete runway in Florida, but the dust of the California desert. The change of landing site has meant major adjustments, including the plan to quench the crew's thirst.
Congratulations, a great-looking landing. And from the entry team, got some good news. Good news is the beer is very, very cold this morning. The bad news is it's 3,000 miles away.
The landing was so accurate, it might as well have been on the narrow runway in Florida. As for the success of the mission, NASA will remember it for the fact that 2 satellites were put into space, earning NASA nearly $17 million in fees, but the world will remember it for Sally Ride, America's first woman in space.
The thing that I'll remember most about that flight is that it was fun, and in fact, I'm sure it's the most fun I'll ever have in my life.
President Reagan was to have been in Florida, but a phone call to California did nearly as well.
Welcome home. You were there because you were the best person for the job. And I think that sets a standard that's going to be followed for men and women in the force from now on with these experiments. People are picked neither because of nor in spite of, but simply because, like all 5 of you, you were the best for this assignment.
As for the future, this flight has shown that an object can be plucked out of space, essential for the future repair of satellites. Space can become, in fact, a workshop. John Suchet, News at 10 in the United States.
A fire has destroyed equipment worth millions of...
Good evening. Could we be witnessing the start of the breakup of the Palestine Liberation?
Shuttle is down, not in Florida as intended, but in California. Everything is fine. Challenger came safely back to Earth today, although it was 3 hours late and 3,000 miles from home. The plan had been to come down in Florida, but instead the landing had to be switched to the Edwards Air Force Base in California. The weather on the West Coast was perfect for the landing, rounding off what had been a highly successful 6-day mission. Mission Control welcomed them home, but apologized for the change in venue.
Congratulations, a great-looking landing. The good news is the beer is very, very cold this morning. The bad news is it's 3,000 miles away.
That's what I was afraid of.
The disappointment for America's first woman astronaut, Sally Ride, didn't seem too great.
The thing that I'll remember most about that flight is that it was fun, and in fact, I'm sure it's the most fun I'll ever have in my life.
Round. Union has launched a new Soyuz spacecraft. There are 2 cosmonauts on board, and it's thought that they'll try and link up with the unmanned space station Salyut 7. The last Soyuz flight, with 3 cosmonauts on board, failed to link up with Salyut. What went wrong has never been explained. And let's hope the Russians don't have the same problems which the Americans had on their latest shuttle flight. It landed on the right day, but in the wrong place, in California, instead of its launch site in Florida. Newsround's space editor, Reg Turnell, has sent us this exclusive report on why the shuttle had to land last Friday.
The main reason why Shuttle Challenger had to land in the Californian desert on Friday and not wait as planned for perfect weather here at the Cape on Saturday was that once again the toilet broke down. Officially, Challenger was brought home because of a faulty fuel cell. But I've learned that the toilet, hidden behind a curtain on the lower deck, where the 5 astronauts, including Sally Ride, had to cook, eat and sleep, failed halfway through the 6-day mission. It works with a pump and fan, and it's gone wrong on several previous flights. Now that the crew has increased from 2 to 5, the atmosphere must have got very unpleasant. It's amazing that Sally and her male companions kept smiling and working so